The title of my comments tonight, Managing the City in Challenging Times. It is once again a privilege to present to you a report on the state of the city. Every year my aim is to give you good news, to paint a pleasant picture of San Leandro and the progress we are making as a community. I have to say, as this recession drags on, it is getting harder and harder to bring you good news. I promise I will touch on some positives today, but I must deliver the unpleasant message first. This has been a challenging year, to say the least. The nation's economic downturn, which began nearly 3 years ago, has had a devastating impact on the city's general fund, which, as you know, is our source of funding for nearly all of our basic services: police, fire, libraries, parks, recreation programs, etc. We entered fiscal year 2008-2009 as the first year of a 3-year workout plan with a $4.4 million budget deficit. We were able to balance our budget thanks to the reserves we set aside for just such an economic crisis. However, as 2009 progressed, the picture got even worse. July saw us begin 09-10 with a $2.9 million deficit. Again, we turned to reserves, but those funds are sinking to a critically low level, and we just cannot rely on them any further. Unfortunately, due to a deeper decline in revenues than any of us expected, the deficit has grown to $7 million. With our reserves nearly depleted, we are left with no other choice than to make deep cuts. Once again, the state turned to local governments to balance its budget. The good news is that the $1.8 million the state borrowed from our general fund revenues this year is coming back in the manner of a loan. And you just have to be a Wall Street financier to figure out how that works. But the bad news, and the serious news, is the state is taking $5.1 million from our redevelopment fund. That means fewer and fewer opportunities for us to do community enhancement projects or business development partnerships. These hits to our budget, along with the dramatic decline in sales tax, property tax, and utility user tax revenues, mean we have to make deeper and deeper cuts in our programs and services. Our sales tax revenues alone are down more than $5 million over the past 3 years, with no sign that it will improve soon. Real property transfer taxes are down $4 million from their peak just 3 years ago. And the utility users tax, which you as voters just ratified for us in 2008, is down by $1 million. The only way we can manage the severe fiscal crisis has been to make significant cuts to programs and services, and sadly, jobs. Police and fire made 5% cuts to their budgets, and all other departments cut their budgets by 15%. And we are looking at even deeper cuts when the new fiscal year begins this July. Over the past 12 months, we have eliminated 61 full-time equivalent positions in the city. That represents 12% of our workforce, which is staggering. For example, this year's cuts have included 6 police officer positions, which means the chief has had to eliminate 2 school resource officer positions, 1 downtown bicycle patrol officer, an investigator in the property crimes, and a motorcycle officer for traffic enforcement, and 1 officer in the technical unit who is assigned to special enforcement. The cuts in personnel have hurt services provided by all departments. We have fewer librarians and less help at the reference desk, plus we are buying fewer books, periodicals, movies, and music CDs for library patrons to enjoy. We have had to cut funding for Veterans Day activities, the Arts Council, Flag Day, and other community events, and yes, even the Cherry Festival will not be happening this year. There are routine delays in our ability to make repairs at the parks, or to our street lights, or to process plans for building projects. And we no longer have the personnel to do emergency preparedness training for the community. Living in earthquake country, this makes me nervous because we need to be as prepared as we can as residents for the next big one. The tragedy in Haiti should have been a wake-up call for all of us. Thankfully, the American Red Cross will come to neighborhoods and businesses and give preparedness training for us. You must be able to care for yourself and your family for at least 3 days should a catastrophic earthquake occur. But an even bigger risk we are facing is the elimination of a fire ladder truck and a company of 9 firefighters that go along with that truck. Even though we could see a savings of $400,000 to $500,000 in the city if the cities of Newark and Union City consolidate their fire services with Alameda County, that still won't be enough for us to be able to save that ladder truck company as our budget cuts go deeper and deeper. Loss of these police officers and firefighters will mean slower response time to all emergencies, putting our community at a greater risk of loss of life and property. In his State of the State address a few weeks ago, the governor said, "The worst is over for California's economy." I'm glad he thinks so, because it sure is slow in coming for San Leandro. It is quite possible that the City Council and I will need to go to the voters before this year is out and ask for help to increase city revenue. What we would look for is a source of revenue that is locally controlled, that can't be tapped by Sacramento. This, of course, would require a fair amount of discipline for us as a city council to shepherd those new revenues responsibly, to restore the critical services and programs our community has lost, and to restore the city's reserves and fiscal stability. We know we may have a daunting task ahead of us to convince the voters of this town to help us raise taxes during this fiscal crisis. But sadly, given the recent news that our revenues continue to decline, we are going to have to make even deeper cuts in our programs, services, and personnel as early as July. Given our current fiscal crisis, we could well be eliminating another 30 jobs come July 1 to be able to get to a balanced budget. Similar to what President Obama told Congress in his State of the Union address, we need to budget for those services that are essential and sacrifice for the time being those things that are not. In the past several weeks, we have been soliciting input from voters in San Leandro about where our priorities should be for city services. We have received over 900 replies, which is pretty impressive. We have heard from you in the community. We know and understand what you are thinking and feeling and what you want from your city government. Unfortunately, we are not going to be able to meet your expectations until we get some new revenues and the economy turns around. Fiscal stability is the City Council's #1 priority, and we have directed the City Manager and his staff to bring us a balanced budget for fiscal year 2010-2011. This will require difficult choices and sacrificing some programs and services that are near and dear to us. We need to look at serving our community as a whole, working together for the good of the whole community, not showing preference to one project or one area of town at the expense of others. We are all on this ship together, and it is imperative that we work together to keep San Leandro on a steady course toward recovery.